A very warm welcome. I want to welcome you to this edition of Behind the Headlines here on UBC. And my name is Charles Odongso, and this is yet another edition of Behind the Headlines this Wednesday, the 26th of April 2023, the last Wednesday of the month, and the first quarter getting wound up. And so, but we are back to this yet another discussion, this time looking at regional politics, looking at regional dynamics, regional security and stability, if you like. We are talking matters Sudan, the Sudan as it were, not South Sudan, as many of you know. Today we are going to be looking at the Sudan civil unrest and asking ourselves what challenges actually it poses. There is a civil war really, but you could call it unrest for now, that is going on in that part of the world, and it is posing a number of challenges for the region already. The UN has warned that the Sudan neighboring 7 countries, and mostly countries that have been volatile or are actually volatile. You're talking about Ethiopia, you are talking about Central African Republic, you are talking about Chad, you are talking about South Sudan itself. All these are countries. You're talking about Libya. You cannot forget Libya. All these are countries, and then of course there is Eritrea. Either they have had already, you know, a lot of civil war, or they are going through, actually 5 of them, if I'm not mistaken, are going through their own civil wars. And the UN is warning that this portends very big danger. It is likely to cause a bad effect on regional, negative effect on regional security and stability, a region that is potentially volatile and potentially, you know, a spark for several other civil strife. So to discuss all this, let me start with Professor, we have next to me here Professor Sarah Sally, who is Dean School of Women and Gender Studies. Professor, you're most welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Good evening, viewers.
Next to Professor is Counsel Edgar Tavaro. Counsel Edgar Tavaro is he is a lawyer, but he is a special envoy of Khartoum in the region, in this part of the world. Counsel Edgar, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm also many other things.
Yes, I know.
I have taught at university.
Yes.
I've taught at university. Dean at the law school at some point. And a humble Ugandan trying to...
You say you are a teacher.
Better things for, for humanity.
Representative of the Basongora people.
Represent the
Basongora people, the endangered Basongora people.
Edgar, it's good to have you back on the show.
Thank you. And BBC is home Saturday for me.
Yes. Edgar was one time the CEO of this place, and he wants to downplay it, but one time he managed this place. So if this place has been badly managed at one time, Edgar was part of
the mismanagement. The one who mismanaged is well known. He ended up in jail.
Next to Edgar, to the left, is Mr. Freddie David Egesa, who is a security analyst. Egesa is also so many things. I'll allow him say them for himself. He speaks for himself. Egesa, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Good evening, all viewers. I'm Fred David Egesa. That's about that.
Good. Since you have decided to hide the others, I will keep quiet. But my viewers may not spare you. You know, they keep coming through, you know, more direct. Finally, on the panel is Brigadier General Felix Kulaije, UPD Defense Spokesperson.
Al-Burhan.
Yeah, and General Felix Kulaije has been an MP in the last parliament, the 10th parliament, and is now back in service and in full combat. General, you're most welcome to the show.
I've never left combat, so that one is, you don't have to add it. Number two, the title is defense spokesperson.
Yes.
Normally when you say EPDF, the ministry staff think we are segregating them, yet they are the ones who pay me.
Oh. That matters, right?
They are the ones who process my facilitation.
He's at policy level as well.
But Edgar, I don't see what, I mean, Charles.
Yeah.
I didn't see why you called me. You called him when you have this panel of well-informed lady and gentlemen.
Oh, let's review that at the end of the show.
Okay.
Let's review that at the end of the show,
Right.
and then we will determine. Let me start with the guesser to lay down the ground for us, and then I will bring each of you at different points. But I must say that I'm still expecting the minister in charge of regional cooperation, Honorable Mulimba. He promised that he would be joining the team because this is an important discussion that he wanted to be a part of. But Mr. Egesa, when you like talking a lot about analyzing security issues, when you see fighting breaking out near us, we are not immediate neighbor, as it were, but South Sudan, which is our immediate neighbor, borders the Sudan, and they're just the buffer between us and the Sudan. What comes to your mind in terms of stability, in terms of security?
Thank you so much. Of course, I'm seeing a situation whereby, like, if someone wants to start a bushfire, I remember what my grandfather used to do if he wanted to prepare the bushes for the next grazing. You know, he would carry fire, he puts it in different locations, so that at the end of the day, the whole bush is covered. That's what I see, because there is someone we should get to know as Africans who is trying to throw fires in different locations so that Africa is on fire, and possibly it becomes a den, it becomes a forest for his future programs and whatever. Because when you look at look at Congo, we have a situation. Look at Southern Sudan, of course, you know, Southern Sudan still has stability challenges. Then now we have Sahel at the other end. Then we have, now Sudan is also, the fire is now moving closer. So it's like sooner or later, Africa will be on fire. And we are talking about, of course, the jihadists and so many things. But to me, I still believe that even behind the jihadists and all the people who plan wars in Africa, there is someone. I'm very suspicious of the Western world. I'm very suspicious that they still want us to go back to a den, possibly, so that many things like minerals and other things are not. We don't gain out of what the Lord has given us, and in the process, we shall be their kind of reserve for continuity as the Western world.
That's a very heavy accusation. Someone trying to throw the fire. Mm-hmm. Do you say that with some firm belief?
Yes, because at the end of the day, when you look at all these wars, who benefits more? Who manufactures weapons? Who ends up carrying minerals as wars region? Who ends up, look at a situation where France came, pretended to pacifying the Sahel, and in the process they are caught in situations of dealing with the warmongers within. Now, if you look at all that, smuggling gold, doing this and the other. So to me, by the way, I look at a situation whereby someone is out there using jihadists as troops, but with a command, with someone with a bigger idea or maybe a bigger plan to suffocate Africa, put it down to be a future reserve for minerals and whatever we have here, because you never know. Soon or later, some areas we may not have enough fuel. If at all the world is to go on forever, we may not have enough fuel here and there. And of course, the reserves are in Africa.
Edgar, you as an envoy of Khartoum,
to where?
He will tell us.
General knows where. He knows. He's one of the people I consulted before I took up responsibilities that could get me in trouble.
Now, General, you have asked a question that is going to expose you. If you are an advisor on this...
No, as a personal friend, he's my big brother.
Edgar should tell us. I need us to first... Egesa has started, he reminds me of the boxing ring. You invite people to come, and for him, immediately before the whistle goes, he gives a punch because he's ready for the punch. He has just started from that end. So I want to first bring in then Edgar to first bring us back to where this is beginning from. What in your is this a conflict of resources? Is it, or it is a political conflict that you can put your hands on and say, these two sides, the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support, the forces, are they fighting a political battle, or it is bigger? What is the cause?
Thank you, Charles. Unfortunately for me on this occasion, you did some justice and introduced me as an envoy, which I am. I'm transforming into a diplomat. And it's a very hard transformation to make. You know me fairly well. I'm blunt. I'm a little, rough-edged, rough on the edges, and I say it as it is. But on this occasion, I'll be nuanced. Is it a conflict over minerals? Is it a political conflict? I've authored a paper that is circulating. I hope it will be published this weekend in one of the mainstream papers. But I did run on chimp reports entitled Identity, Militarism, and Reclamation of the Sudan. There is a deep history to this all. And I agree almost entirely with what my elder, Mr. Gesa, said. But I'd like to situate it in as far as the dynamics of that time in the Sudan. Sudan has written history dating back to 350 AD. We're talking of about 7,000 years of written history. The Sudan has been a contestation between different races.
700.
Yeah, 7,000 years. Yeah? It has been a contestation between the Kermits, the Bedouin Arabs, the Nubians, the Kushites, the Afro-Asiatic races, and what you know as the Nilotics. It's a civilization that has been contributed, has had a contribution of all of those dynamics. It also had occupation by the Ottoman Empire. At some point, also the Napoleonic Empire extended to that place. The Turco-Egyptian, you are aware, Emin Pasha. Emin Pasha was supposedly Turkish, but British, raised as Turkish and came as, he was a medical doctor, became a general, and became a governor. You remember he ran territory running from what we know of the Sudan now, up to the present day Topical in northern Uganda. So it has been a contestation between a civilization that has been a contestation between different racial identities, racial, ethnic, and religious. We've had Muslims. Even with the Muslims, they're not very agreed. They have the Sunni Muslims, they have the Mahdists, then you have the Christians, you have the Orthodox, you have the Coptic Christians, then you have the so-called Anglican or the Protestant churches. Now, in the Sudan, they are not agreed on the identity. You will find a person darker than Mr. Odongtho being described as an Arab.
No, that is not how they describe it. They say a person as African.
As African.
As
No,
Odongtho.
exactly. And you see,
People like you and the general are not true Africans.
Charles, I'm speaking in the context of Sudan. And when, you see, and I'm glad you've said African. The noun Sudan means sunburnt, black, or African, depending on the dialect of Arabic you're speaking. So you have people who are calling themselves Arab Sudanese, Bedouin Sudanese, and they're saying they are not African. But the noun Sudan refers to an African. So they are not agreed on that, and that has been one of the major issues sticking out throughout the post-independence period. Now, Sudan got independence in 1956. They had only 2 brief years of civilian government. That government was overthrown by General Abouf, Ibrahim Abouf, who was also overthrown in 1963, a civilian coup, supposedly by Marxists, left-leaning people. But they ran a military government up to 1972, 1969, when General Numeri took over. Now, General Numeri tried to run a government based on some sound, principles of governance, but borrowed very heavily and found himself unable to pay back the loans, and therefore turned to the likes of Saudi Arabia to finance his economy. He therefore took to extreme Islam to enforce his authority over Sudan. But you shall recall, previously in 1950, was it 58 or 62, there had been the Anyanya movement that broke out. By the southern armies, and they wanted to establish their own administration, assert their identity as so-called Africans and non-Muslim, what in they speak in Sudan they call animists. Well, it's politically correct, but you say, well, sometimes they say non-believers or whatever words, the adjectives they choose. So, in 1972, there was a peace agreement that was signed between the Anyanya and Southern Sudanese, forming a government of autonomous, kind of self-autonomy. And if you recall, that's when Joseph Lagu came in as vice president of the Sudan. Now, that agreement collapsed in 1983 when Colonel John Garang and the certain Captain Salvatore killed Merdit, broke away. Merdit broke away to go. They were which division were they?
Actually, Merdit rebelled.
And Garang there. Yeah.
was sent.
He was sent to go and quell the rebellion,
and
but
he joined him.
That's right. It was Captain
Yes.
Captain Salvatore. Yes, and joined the rebellion.
Yeah.
So in 1985. They had elections. Numeri fell, they had elections under Mahdi, Sadiq al-Mahdi, who in turn was overthrown in 1989 by Bashir. Bashir ruled up to 2019 when he was overthrown by his vice president. His vice president, General Wad bin Awuf, served for only 24 hours and ceded space for General Burhan. Now, I'm giving this background to show you that militarism has been part and parcel of the state of the Sudan. And they've been using Islam as a tool of control to suppress everyone else. We're talking of extreme Islam. So we have political formations in the Sudan to which General Hamdan, popularly known as Hamdit, Dagalo, belongs the persuasion of Sharia law establishing a theocratic state. Now, many Sudanese, particularly the educated Sudanese, who happen to occupy what they call the Nile Valley, what you'd call the Arab riverine Arabs, they are sophisticated, they are highly educated, and of high social grace. They practice poetry, dance, music, and drama, and they are not drawn to the extreme form of Islam and, by extension, a theocratic state. So those are the ones who have been behind the so-called forces Forces for Freedom and Change, the FFC, who led the protests. They are mainly civil society, composed of civil society, academics, the intelligentsia of the society. So they led the protests starting in November 2018, culminating in overthrow of the government in April 2019, and forming a partly civilian, partly military government headed by Hamdok, a UN economist, very highly respected. So Hamdet Dagalo leads a militia known as the Rapid Support Forces. They're a remnant, actually not even a remnant, they emerged out of the Janjaweed. And the Janjaweed bear most of the responsibility for the genocide in Darfur. Yeah. That is General Hamidet. There was a guy called General Salah, General Salah, who was the director of military intelligence. There was Ali Usman, Taha, yes. And Ahmed Harun, who incidentally escaped from jail today. He's indicted by the, Harun.
I know had been indicted by the
ICC. Harun escaped from jail today and went on a spin doctoring. So Harun was Minister for Humanitarian Affairs and was charged with extending humanitarian assistance to Darfur. Instead, he used his position to go and recruit Janjaweed to kill the protesters who belong to the Justice and Equality Movement of General Mini Minawa. Now, Minawa had, in May 2008, he launched a very daring attack on Khartoum. Yeah. But it was stopped in Omdurman. Omdurman and Khartoum are twin cities. They are just across another on the same river, on the different sides of the banks of River Nile. Now, Hamidet is a very wealthy businessman. His militia organization is headed by him and deputized by his brother, Abdallah. Between the two, they are worth $4 billion US. What? 4 billion. General Hamidan lent the central bank of Khartoum, Sudan, $1 billion US to stabilize their currency. So I'm giving this report to show you that Hamidan established a parallel state. Some people have been saying that a state within a state. No, that's not true. He's been having a parallel state. 3 weeks to this commotion that we're seeing in Khartoum, he bought 1,000 Land Cruiser 2. What do you call those vehicles I see driven by colonels in Uganda?
Yes.
Land Cruiser 2. They are very easy to maneuver in the desert. And
the double cabin.
They are actually popular in the desert.
Popular in the desert. They can maneuver very easily in the desert.
They're very popular in South Sudan.
Yeah. You can mount a rocket launcher very easily and dismount it. I'm not experienced in battle. The person who's trained in this thing. So I'm giving that back to show that it has been a military state. It's been an Islamic state. And you have these global forces, globalization of culture. People love freedom. People want to be free. They don't want the state to hover over them. Now, many of the Khartoum elites who led the overthrow of Bashir disagreed with the Rapid Support Forces. Why? First, they are from the provinces. Two, they want to establish a theocratic state, which they don't want. So what is central at this all is a clawback from the Khartoum elites, because they were discussing a framework agreement to establish a civilian government, to establish an electoral what they call it, a roadmap for an electoral
democracy
that would lead to a civilian-led government. So one of the sticking issues was incorporation of the RSF in the Sudanese army. Now, RSF had been brought to Khartoum to enforce the regime of General Bashir. They found resistance in the Khartoum elites. But when the fledgling government of Bashir fell, RSF did a quick deal and they joined the Sudan armed forces in forming a coalition and therefore becoming the deputy leaders of the coalition. Now, the reason why they've become a major force is that they are the most organized force outside of the state, militarily and even politically, because they have the resources.
and economically.
And economically. Now, Hamidate is not a simple person. He's contributed troops to Yemen to fight the Houthi rebels. He's contributed troops to Libya, Caliph Hafsa. They led siege on Tripoli. He's fighting in Chad. In Central African Republic, we have what they call the Baggara Arabs.
That's right.
The Baggara Arabs are actually Darfurians like Hamidate. Now, the same, now I don't know whether I'm getting into some areas of controversy now. The same group gives supply and logistic lines to the rebels, the Seleka rebels.
Central Africa.
Central Africa. Then there's a territory called Sector 6, the Sector 6 of Central African Republic. It's a supply route for ADF in the DRC. And the planes are seen being loaded and dropping off aerodromes in Utwale and Batwele inside the DRC to supply ADF in Ituri. So the situation we have, as Mr. Gesa said, it's fluid and it's going to spread. Very lastly, every territory above the 14th parallel, the parallel, these latitudes,
Yeah.
those imaginary lines that are on maps, every territory beyond the 14th latitude in Africa is in turmoil. You talked of Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Chad, Libya. So what is Niger? What is common about the similar what? One, religion, Islam, also politics, or rather the identity.
Resources?
I'm coming to resources later. Identity.
Militarism?
Depending on the day, they are an Arab. You see one calling himself an Arab, another time saying, no, I'm an African, I'm a black. They're discriminated on skin color. Then when it comes to resources, yes, they're mineral resources rich, but more importantly, they are suffering climate change effects, the adverse effects of climate change. One, there's increased desertification. Lake Chad is shrunk. Lake Chad, where there was water 10 years ago, you can now drive through. Three, we've had a locust invasion in that part of the world. So there was crop failure, reduced rainfall for the last 3 years. So we've had the pressures between the nomadic tribes and the sedentary tribes, and there's a clash over that. And the outside forces exploit these things to see what is happening, to witness what we are seeing in the Sudan.
Okay. Thanks a lot for that. You took us back into history. And if I had thought that it is, militarism, religion, identity, blacks and Arab Islam and all that, now we have it bigger than what I thought.
I warned you. But with Edgar.
But I also told you that we shall know why you came.
Okay.
Because of me.
The General has been in that part of the world, near there at least. So he understands some of those issues. And, in his own right, he loves the going back into history. But let's now bring it back, General, to where there is an intersection of this, dynamics, and within the region, with the potential to cause more fire in the region if not checked, with the potential to, you know, affect the economy, a potential to destabilize the region. What do you read into this conflict in Khartoum? Do we have potential to de-escalate?
First of all, why these two fire up? What maximized the contradictions? Secondly, you are dealing with a zone that has different conflict systems feeding onto each other. The Sudan itself is a conflict system. The Horn of Africa.
In the conflict.
Then you have the Great Lakes region conflict system. All these feed on each other. Number one. Number two, and I'm glad Edgar has brought that analysis and linking all the way to ADF in Eastern Congo. Has anybody questioned why Ethiopia, which was promising economically, politically,
Even socially.
and socially, what happened? What brought up that conflict between the Tigrinya and the rest of the country? Somebody was not comfortable with a country, 80 million people, almost 1 million troops under arms, with an economy that was manufacturing even aircraft engines, staying intact. That progress is no more.
They had transferred the power twice.
They had
Peacefully.
transferred,
For the first time in 2,000 years.
in 2000 years, they had transferred power twice, peacefully. What happened? Important for us to ask. And I will not go into dissect, because of my uniform, to dissect the internal dynamics that even are undercurrent today in Ethiopia. So, connect, move back to Sudan and Egypt. Because this conflict currently in the Sudan cannot escape Egyptian influence.
They're involved in combat.
I didn't want to say
yes, I'd forgotten your defense spokesperson.
I didn't want to say it.
He's in uniform.
Oh, sorry.
I'm in uniform. 3, there is a strategic component. And that's what Mr. Gesa, when he was telling about fires here and there, was throwing to you. There is a strategic component that is causing this disagreement inside the Sudan. Is he Hamdan?
Yeah,
No, no,
Hamdan.
the president.
Burhan.
Burhan.
Al-Fatah.
Burhan was approached by Russia.
Russia. For
That's General Abdel.
Yeah.
Al-Burhan.
Al-Burhan.
Al-Fatah al-Burhan.
Yes.
Was approached by Russia for a
Was
naval
approached
base.
by Russia for a base on Port Sudan. And he got a call from an ambassador. Don't accept.
U.S. ambassador.
Exactly.
He's in uniform.
And Burhan said,
Oh.
I am the president of this country. The rest
Is history.
is history.
It happened in space of about four
A
days.
similar
4 days.
scenario happened on Bozize in Central Africa. When President Bozize gave Chinese
Oil.
concessions
For oil and diamonds.
for oil and diamonds, the French objected. And Bozize said, but I'm the president. That's how Serikale was emerged. So there is a history. We cannot be hoodwinked by anything. There is a history and things are happening. Now, you rightly said Sudan borders 7 countries. And almost all of them have had conflicts.
Actually, all. Apart
All.
from Egypt?
Egypt has its internal.
Has internal dynamics. So there are already scars that can easily erupt into wounds. Now, can Africa salvage Sudan?
Yes. Big question.
Yes and no.
Start with a good one.
Yes, if left alone.
No, because it can never be left alone.
I didn't know General Kuyanga had become a diplomat.
No, you see,
In uniform.
You see, Edgar, I have a limitation of the uniform. You know what I could say on this show. But I need to point out, you see, these things are related. Are you seeing the developments in DRC?
Yeah, yeah. Angola.
Uh-huh.
Angola. Let me not mention other countries.
Had East Africa failed to pursue what it was doing?
No.
So how is Angola coming in?
There's an ambassador in that part of the world who is very close to the establishments there. An ambassador of one of the Western powers.
Exactly. So, like Mr. Gesa was pointing out, our problem are the resources. They are only left here, and somebody wants them cheaply.
So you're saying that it is bad to have the resources?
It's not bad, especially if those who have the resources understand where they sit. Okay? The unfortunate thing in Africa is that many of us don't appreciate how strategic we are. And so we accept to be driven by others, even when we don't know where they are taking us.
And we're even now more strategic in a multipolar world.
Now, that's where I was going last year as my last point. Thanks.
Thank you.
You now have a multipolar world where you have powers, all the powers scrambling for this
Africa.
region. I normally say that this region is like an 18-year-old girl on the village. Every man wants to be a member. And if her father is not a strict one, if she's in senior 6 river, she will stop there. By the next admissions of university, she would have conceived.
We have a gender specialist here. A professor to that.
But it's an analogy I use to illustrate how valuable this region is. So valuable, yet so ignorant about its value. You have an elite group. We are talking about elite in Sudan. You have an elite group in this region, consumed by different things altogether.
They're the biggest problem in the region. The elite here.
Voila.
And the leadership that is emerging.
Now, what is... I think I stop provoking me.
Much obliged.
You see,
I'll stop.
what is emerging now in this region and Africa as a whole is an elite totally uprooted from the ground. All right? Phone, WhatsApp, Twitter,
Big deal.
Instagram. What is happening on the ground?
Zero.
Resources are going. So as I conclude this, Charles, you have potential of flare-up in the entire Sudan, meaning the Sudan and South Sudan.
No, Darfur is already on fire.
You can hear the full
Darfur is
on
already,
fire.
they are full-scale war. in
Uh-huh.
Darfur.
You know that Chad has been on fire. Central Africa, the same story.
Yes.
DRC, your guess is as good as mine. There you have to go very slow again. But certainly, with all those armed groups, you have challenges in DRC. So, the way forward, you know, we had African statesmen. If you listen to Nyerere, for example, explaining the Congo question to the Congolese themselves.
Even the Burundians, you remember?
Even the Burundians. When he had been approached to be the lead mediator.
For the Burundi peace process.
Such a leader was very valuable at that time to show us the way. Today, how many do you have that will indeed go beyond territorial claim and address a question as African leaders? They are not very many. I'm shy to sound selfish, but you may have only one man.
President Museveni.
President Museveni.
I mentioned it somewhere and I was nearly linked by the elite.
Okay.
By the elite.
They can lynch you if they want.
But I have my reasons and I'll state them if given.
Just be quiet a bit and let me bring in
Much
Doctor.
obliged, Charles.
Doctor, you have a lot of a mix of so many things that have been thrown on the table, and but the two issues that for me I want us to do is to narrow down this discussion to our own situation and to see how we relate with the issues that have been raised by your colleagues, and whether we have capacity to actually solve this problem. You see, there is a lot of diplomatic dilemma on the hands of the leaders of the region, even to just know who do we support, where do we start from, and that discussion is still going on. Of course, the UN has come in to warn of the potential danger and the potential magnitude of what we are dealing with, but our leaders are still, apart from evacuating their nationals, there is still no solid decision. I'm yet to be maybe to be informed if there is African Union taking a decision or IGAD. What are your own thoughts of this?
Thank you very much, Charles, and thanks a lot, everybody. First of all, I would like to share the sentiments other people have expressed here, and some of these sentiments, they are best suited to talk about them. But I think we also need to bring on board a dimension we haven't looked at. And I would like to build on Afande Kulaje's parting thoughts on where in the past you'd look for a statesman. But now it's not very easy to find a statesman to speak to these matters. Actually, ever since this crisis broke up, I've been waiting to hear the voice of the African Union. And I hope we shall hear it loud and clear. I know there are some moves, but it's not very clear. I happen to be on a group of scholars where some people are even Sudanese, and every day they post what is happening in their communities. Of course, they are shocked that this is a kind of conflict which has come to Khartoum, because normally they occur elsewhere, and Khartoum is the place they run to. And I will not delve into the security things. I think they are the experts in the security matters. But I think we also need to pay attention to what has been happening to these states after the 60s. And I'm a social scientist. The kind of history and political history we studied then, when Africa was decolonizing after independence, was a kind of Africa where the identity of the continent was built by people who were not just leaders, but they were thinkers, like the Kwame Nkrumahs, the Julius Nyereres that I've said. But beyond that, there were also people who were infusing into this debate from external forces, people like Walter Rodney, people like Marcus Garvey, and people trying to give Africa a soul. And who are you as a people? And what would you want to watch out for? What happened fast forward in the 1980s? We liberalized. We were told the state is not needed except for a certain few areas, but the rest we could leave to the market. For 30 years plus, we have watched either the state being squeezed out of its role it should have done, which is giving guidance to a nation, okay? Giving guidance, providing resources, and I know Edgar talked about things like climatic catastrophes. Those do happen in society. Sometimes you cannot control. But who comes in to provide welfare and the stopgap measure when those kinds of things have occurred? It is the state. But we were preached to that we needed to restrict the state to security and other things, leave the others for the market. Simply because we had the balance of payment excesses, which many countries have, even the advanced ones. So we swallowed that kind of idea. Where the state retreated, who occupied? These are the paramilitary forces.
They didn't retreat, they abdicated their responsibility.
Okay, the state abdicated its responsibility. Who occupied that space? If you look, when you look at forces like Boko Haram, they are rising up to fill the gap of marginalization by the Nigerian state. If you looked at the crisis in Darfur, it's because they felt they were marginalized. So a junta rises up to fight, and of course the Janjaweed comes in to counter. If you look at the South Sudan, again, it's this whole feeling of marginalization, feeling of poverty, feeling of that, and how do people react to those kinds of feelings? They make claims, kind of citizenship claims to the state. When the state doesn't respond, people then may take up arms. When they take up arms, what happens is they're either crushed, and if you're lucky, you crush them once and they go silent, but if not, you have to multiply other groups to come and help balance that corner, and another group balance the corner. So what we are finally seeing as a crisis in Sudan, and maybe a crisis in other areas, because they said some of us have all been, the neighbors have all been at war, is a crisis where you have a retreat of the state. People still look to the state. So the gap left, people still look to the state. They're not going to understand your dynamics of whichever economics you're applying. So groups come in to fill the vacuum left. When groups come in to fill this vacuum, depending on what the groups are, if they're community-based group or an NGO, it will be different. If they're military groups, they'll respond militarily. So you have years of building, because neoliberalism, again, is not just an economic thing. It also occurs politically. So we have an infusion of political ideals. Whether they apply or not, we bring them. They have an infusion of cultural ideals. So you can no longer talk of those African values of Ubuntu, because people are looking online and borrowing what they need. They also bring on board things like these activist groups, militarily or otherwise. So when you then have that kind of playing field, the state is permanently going to be in a contestation with these other groupings. And how? Because it is no longer the controller of the monopoly. It's no longer monopolizing what should be done, decision making, for example, giving guidance to the state. So you have all these groups coming in and saying, this is what I want to do. If you read about the current crisis that's happening in Sudan now, of course you talk about beyond the undercurrents that those who know best have articulated here. The official that's presented to us publicly is Hamdan thinks it is his time, okay? Because he has offered, first of all, he rises by providing support to the Bashir government to control people who are again claiming marginalization. He rises and builds his financial base by helping to control the Houthis, but also he is a very big control of the gold system. And with that, he's actually a parallel state, like everybody has said. So you have two authorities running in a place. How do you then resolve the political question in that? Initially, it looks like a military thing, but when they make peace and a truce from 2018, then you have to resolve the political question. So how far are we at resolving the political question? And maybe that's why we are seeing the current dynamic we are seeing. But let us not just look at it as a military thing. There are factors that have been fueling and energizing and animating this outburst we are seeing now. And unfortunately, maybe if we had seen them earlier, we wouldn't be having the outburst. Thank you.
Okay, good. Let's look at other factors as well. We will come back to some of those other factors, including when you talk about the retreat of the state. We can start to ask ourselves, what lessons do we learn as a region?
It was just
No, it abdicated its responsibility and it's now absent.
Let's go for a break right now. When we come back, we will be continuing with the discussion. Also, send in your comments or questions, and I will incorporate them in the discussions in the second segment of this show. Let's go for the break right now.
Talk with freedom. Get MTN Freedom voice bundles that don't expire. Dial *100 *21# or my MTN app for more bundles. Together, we're unstoppable.
It's the encounters with our majestic gorillas. The thrill of taking on the falls of the Nile River. The joy of discovering new traditions and a lot more. Join us at the 2023 Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo from the 26th to the 29th of April at the Commonwealth Resort, Munyonyo. Rediscover our country's uniqueness and see what the tourism sector has in store for you. Visit www.poate.co.ug to secure your spot and get set to learn, network, and explore. The Pearl of Africa Tourism Expo is brought to you by the Uganda Tourism Board in partnership with Competitiveness and Enterprise Development Projects. Explore Uganda, the Pearl of Africa.
Yokato, this is a quick call. I'm almost out of minutes. Now, the center.
Why rush through such important conversations? Airtel Uganda has made it possible for you to call across all networks in Uganda at the best rates with the new Bona voice bundles. Stay connected anytime, anywhere, with minutes valid for calls on all networks. Dial *100 *1#. Select voice bundles and select Bona voice bundles today. Airtel, the smartphone network.
Do you know your architect? Is your architect registered? An architect in Uganda is one registered with the Architects Registration Board, ARB. ARB is a statutory body mandated to regulate and maintain standards and practice of architecture in Uganda. Save money and life that is often lost in collapsing buildings as a result of employing quacks to supervise your construction sites. Remember, only registered architects have professional indemnity in the event of loss of your property. To learn more about the benefits of using a registered architect, visit www.arbuganda.go.ug now, or call us on 0781 498 823 or find us at PKF Building, Kira Road, Kampala. ARB is here to ensure professionalism in the architectural industry.
Are you tired of high fees and slow transfer time when sending money? Look no further. Airtel Money is here to revolutionize the way you move your money. We have revised our rates, and now sending money from Airtel to other networks in Uganda, East Africa, and to the rest of the world has never been more affordable. Plus, you can trust Airtel Money to get your money where it needs to go quickly and safely. Simply dial *185# and start sending money. Switch to Airtel Money today and experience unbeatable rates and top-notch services for all your local and international money transfer needs. Airtel Money, instant, secure, borderless.
This isn't just a girl. She is the future. This is a teacher, a doctor, a community leader, our future president.
She is our family's pride, and as her father, I will protect her from child marriage and talk to her about the dangers of teenage pregnancy. We each have a role to play in empowering our teenage girls to protect them from child marriage and pregnancy, because when we empower them, we empower our nation. Protect the girl, save the nation.
Take action. Report any case of defilement or child marriage to the police or call Sauti 116.
Welcome back from the break. This is the second segment, the last segment of the discussion, the Behind the Headlines this Wednesday, the 26th of April 2023. There is a friend who told me that, Charles, today I'm going to, I don't miss your show, but today you know that I have to watch the football as well. No, there are some who are half-hearted, but right now Arsenal is trailing. The Man City is leading by 2-0, and it is not good news for some of us. But we shall soldier on. For us, we shall soldier on for now. I'm with Professor Sarasali, Council Edgar Tavaro, Brigadier Felix Kulaije, and Freddie David Egesa. And we are looking at the Sudan crisis, the Sudan conflict, and asking ourselves, to what extent is it a challenge to the region, and how can we de-escalate? How can we resolve the problem? Before, the last I checked is over 400 people so far dead.
Yeah. 537 now.
500 now.
37
the figures
you saw the stoning on the streets?
The statistics
and the chopping,
yes, stoning of some people by guys in uniform.
No, that was not Khartoum. Khartoum soldiers speak Arabic, and the Arabic is very strong. Yeah?
So what I did just
No, it was. I think it was from Central African Republic.
No.
Okay.
And you know, soldiers. Why would you stone when you have a gun?
It is easier. One bullet is easier to discharge than wasting a lot of
that
energy.
video was not,
especially where there is lawlessness.
I'm not saying that it's not happening, but that very video was certainly not happening.
So before we went into the break, Professor here said that there are other factors that we need to look at, but interesting to note the issues that you guys have raised, issues of crisis of identity, religion, of course, the overbearing foreign hand, the invisible hand, of Jack, and who is a master of, they say, a jack of all trade.
And the master of none.
And then, of course, the potential for terrorism growing, the potential for businesses being, thrown, businesses going down, and especially the fear of regional unrest, security unrest in the region. Mr. Egesa, I come back to you. Where do you see a solution, if any, in this? Earlier you talked about, in your earlier submission, and you and your colleagues followed, you referred to this, someone throwing this fire and setting it up around the place which they want banned. But the question that I would want to ask, as, let me say, innocently, of course, many people ask questions, know that the answer, it is not really innocent. We Africans have problems, we know it. But we also have, challenges, I mean.
We are the problem.
Okay. But I meant we have challenges from our problem. Understand it this way.
We are authors of our own misery, Charles. I always tell
that I may not agree with.
We are authors of our own misery.
But let me ask the question this way. We have lots of challenges. And we know for a fact that honey attracts
bees.
Exactly. And we know we have the honey. But we still, as day follows night, as night follows day, a year after a year, we still fail to even solve our own problems. Can we start by solving them, Mr. Egesa? Is it so hard?
Thank you so much. Of course, if you are to solve a problem, you should first of all bother to understand who is against you. And Yakuroga, who is bewitching us? And who is he targeting? Exactly. Who is bewitching Africa? Who is the enemy of Africa? If you have, if you have a common enemy, then you become an item against that enemy. Who is this enemy? Now, investigatively, if you are to deal with any case, like if I've done so many homicide cases, like if I visit a scene of murder or a scene of aggression, what I'll look at seriously is the mind of the criminal, the mind of that person. If I find a body devastated and beaten and scorched with acid, I'll say, I think someone was venting jealousy and anger, someone was venting, you know, if you can just, you could have done one thing to kill a person.
One blow and...
But you're biting, you're breaking the fingers, you are doing this and that. There's a time we recovered the girl, a body of a young lady in Chiramlondo, in Mitiana, and it was messed up. Someone had beaten with his own teeth, whoever, her teeth were someone had even poured acid in her ears, someone had even literally broken the fingers. So when I looked at it, I said, okay.
Like shooting someone, like 30 bullets, exactly, a whole magazine.
Exactly. So the emotionalism, what is this emotionalism about? Now, if you are to understand what because if Africans should understand our problem. What's our problem? Then, if we have a problem, we should understand who benefits out of these problems. Is it the African himself or some other person? Because like I said, in criminalistics, you should bother to understand the mind of the criminal, the mind of that person who could have committed an offense. What is his gain? Who did this? Because that's why I say, well, like our lawyer here will tell us, that they'll say, you have to definitely in criminalistics, you have to come around the intention. What is the intention? Why did this person do this?
The motivation.
Well, now, in Africa, we should see who has written this war plan against Africa. Because there is a war plan written. It is on the wall that someone has written a war plan. Now, once you get to know who has written it, you'll even understand the details of the war plan. And definitely, if you come to, once you read, Mr. Kureja will tell us in intelligence, once you read and understand.
His master's in that area.
I think, yes, so exactly. Once you read and understand the details and the literature of the war plan, then it is very easy for you to counter plan and then come up with a document that will be enforced by your troops. But if you just send out troops, because you have so many, they will be burnt out and eventually will be overrun. So what I'm saying here is that whoever is taking advantage of us, is it okay, are we gaining out of this war? Are we not gaining out of it? Is it destroying all of us? Is it kind of targeting a few of us? Or what someone is doing is using Africa to destroy Africans so that we become so weak that at the end of the day, by the time he takes over, he's literally taking over empty ground. These are questions we should come up with. So, like our council said that we have so many intellectuals in Africa. The only problem, like of course in Uganda, we put away the civic education. Now, in the process, we may have a problem producing statesmen and stateswomen because we are producing scientists. In the process, they'll go to maybe manufacture biological weapons. We have so many other professions which we have maintained, but we have not bothered to groom our the African nation, the African continent, into people who can think for their own nation, who can think for their own continent. So in the process, we will be having issues just because we have not understood. But the day we will wake up to know that we have a common enemy who is looking at us as a messed up country because of maybe poor governance, because of crime, because of so many other things. You know, these were issues in several other continents. But how did they deal with them? Just because they did not have someone adding fire to the fire. So who is this person? If we answer that question, then we shall be good to go and we will solve the problem as Africans. So the easiest would be, let's have academies of thought. Let's come up with areas of analyzing. We have wonderful guys. The lawyer was saying, and I was just wondering this, that in Africa we have such wise guys, a man who can literally store all this history, and then meaning that if we have the history, then we can have the future. Thank you.
Professor, yes, Professor. In this segment, feel free to respectfully interject and interfere as long as,
Okay, so thank you very much, and I would love to thank Egesa for taking us to finding out who is this guy, who is the master of the war plan. But the other question we also need to ask is, how is this master of the war plan playing out with the war plan? Because this person is not coming out and executing the war plan themselves. They are working with someone. So who is that person they're working with? And why is that person working with them? Normally we will be told that if you don't collaborate, you'll be taken out or you'll be denied aid. But why should the denial of aid be a problem to us? And yet we are the same people who claim to be having the richest continent, to be having the resources that everyone's looking for. So it is true, there's an external enemy. But what is our agency in this matter? Are we simply being moved around by the external enemy, or do we also have a role to play in either sustaining these unfair practices, and for that matter, can we also have a chance to stop it? Thank you.
Someone is asking, great show, Charles. This is someone called Immaculate. Great show and a very resourceful panel you have. My question is, besides the Sudan, can the panel, for example, Edgar, comment on how best to resolve the M23 issue in DRC?
I've written on the M23 before. I wrote an essay, if I recall, General, my essay.
Yes, I recall it.
Balkanization, dialogue and conflict transformation in the DRC. How do we resolve? Many times when we are drawing a script for conflict resolution in Africa, we tend to follow a template that again has been set by the Western world for us. Many times I've sat with the so-called UN experts, and they say that their role is to facilitate dialogue. There's nothing wrong with facilitating dialogue, but principle, key to what we should be doing in Africa is conflict transformation. As long as societies are not transformed into productive societies, they shall always remain at conflict. I usually say these things, mouth of these things, and I see Brigadier Kulaije cringing, and I'm going to say them again. I've warned you in advance. We are a primordial society.
That's true.
We are pre-scientific, pre-industrial, and largely peasantry.
Yeah.
We depend on rain-fed agriculture. We have absence of an effective state in all these areas at conflict. The Maghreb region is basically under militia rule. And these are areas that are also resource-rich, the minerals that the world wants. Mali and other areas of the Sahel are rich in uranium.
Yeah.
They have diamonds, they have gold, and for the purposes of the DRC, you now have lithium with
coltan,
lithium and coltan. So I always say that, quoting Einstein, that a problem cannot possibly be solved by the same level of thinking and reasoning that created it.
Yeah.
We have been with the leadership that has been authoring our misery in Africa. And we are continuing with the same leadership. And the leadership that is emerging out of these burning places and ashes is even much worse leadership
than the current one.
You recall at independence, and rightly so, General Kuliayi just pointed out Nyerere. Nyerere had peers all over Africa. You remember the Mulungushi Club? it had Nyerere, it had Kaunda, it had Dr. Bote.
Then you had even those who were not in power.
Yeah, Rwagasore, Prince Louis Rwagasore, who was killed Lumumba.
Whose ideas
were as
Pan-African.
Pan-African. You had people like Professor Dubois
yes.
living in the United States to come and live in Ghana with Kwame Nkrumah to continue the African, you know.
You had Walter Rodney.
Walter Rodney was in the Guyanese economist. Actually, even Ivan Fansatima. And if you recall the study group at Dar es Salaam, where Professor Museveni was a member, General President Museveni, Eria Kategaya, John Kawanga, former MP for Masaka Municipality. He's gone quiet. Even I think Mulonya Mulisemogere was also part of that study group. Let Magara Nabdere was a professor. Sivji, Professor Sivji, yes. Professor Peter Kanywani, Professor Nathan Shamyarira, who actually edited Museveni's treatise on violence.
Okay.
Franz Fanon is the one who edited it and was his supervisor. So you see, at the time, the leadership was cautious of what was at stake. But fortunately, when you listen to the leaders that are emerging out of Africa, I'm 46 years, not too old, not too young anymore. Ideally, people my age should be stepping out of the yoke to come and offer leadership. But whenever you listen to people my age in this country and elsewhere speaking, you really, you weep.
But how equipped have they been for this kind of engagement?
By who?
By who?
Because I think the issue is not that by who. The issue is the kind of education that existed at the time.
If you're talking of education,
which
I'm sorry, I'll take you on.
Yes.
I'm a product of this very education system.
And I agree with you. But your time respected the humanities, respected the politics, respected everything. Right now, the things are largely scientific, and so people can easily come out, but they cannot engage with the affairs of society and the state.
There's a stage you are jumping. There's a season you are jumping.
Okay.
The Amini period.
You see, how did we leave the Nyerere, the America Cabral generation?
Exactly.
Agostino Neto.
And get where we are now.
Neto, there was Eduardo Moderan in Mozambique.
Now, first and foremost, there was a deliberate effort to destroy that thinking.
Exactly.
That's how you have Rodney bombed out, you have Macabral killed, you
Eduardo Moderan killed, Samora Machel
killed, you have
Lumumba,
but Afande, when you were at university, you studied them. You studied the philosopher Franz Fanon, you studied Amilcar Cabral, we studied them.
Correction.
Yes.
I was trained as a teacher at Makerere.
Yes.
Okay, for me I did
the
politics, and we studied
I'm
them.
using was personally acquired because I had been inspired by those personalities I'm talking about.
Okay, so that was you, but there are people who were trained, there was an effort to provide this knowledge in the disciplines where they were.
I wish to disappoint you.
Right now, is that knowledge there in those disciplines?
Even the one you're talking about, when we were at Makerere.
Yes.
The few who carried the revolutionary ideas we are talking about were fought by several professors.
Yes.
No, that one I agree, but I'm saying the knowledge at least was there for students to pick.
And you see, for me, the greatest
around. We will discuss education and it.
Wait, because you see, we're talking about Edgar's point. Edgar's point of being prepared to engage. Because he's saying, when he looks at the generation, he doesn't see. So you have to have the knowledge to be able to engage.
Can I be able to make my submission?
Much obliged.
I am actually...
But you are informing.
I'm actually clearing the generation.
Yes.
They are innocent victims.
Exactly. Of a system.
Of a system.
Of neoliberalism.
Which I totally
Neoliberalism, exactly. Neoliberalism.
I have told you.
It was a poison.
Chambers was made a course in 1996.
Exactly.
Cut us of a campaign of a Ugandan against Chankwazi.
Because of communism.
No, not really. Not really.
Alleged communism.
Alleged communism.
And there was no communism.
But also remember when the state, basically, you know, those of us who attended the so-called traditional schools.
Yes.
They provided what they call holistic education.
Exactly.
But
Education was not just about regurgitating what you had learned in class. You had to go and interact with the people. A school was built with space. You had a playground for track events, football.
I requested guy don't go there because it will divert me.
Much obliged, much obliged.
I request don't go there because there is a point I wanted us to appreciate. When you talk of lack of civic education, all our neighbors have a national service, with the exception of DRC.
DRC having a national, it would have been.
They don't have it.
Under Mobutu, it would never have
But
taken
Kenya
off.
has it.
Yes.
Tanzania has
it.
Rwanda
has it.
In the national service, it's exactly the things we are discussing that young people are fed on. Today, I was watching the Labour conference at Serena, and they're talking about the work ethics of Ugandans. Of course, there are not even ethics to talk about. The point is, as we are talking of the state having retreated, who took leadership after the state disappeared? Because the one who chased the state wanted exactly that virtue and be occupied by civil society. When they were beginning in 1991, I remember the late Tajudeen said, this is a new phase of colonialism. May his soul rest in peace. And what have we seen?
Exactly that.
Colonize the mind.
Colonizes the mind. And this time, at village level.
Exactly.
So the state is in Kampala, but the people are being taken mentally. And so the products you are talking about today, may I call them innocent victims?
No, that one we agree. We were discussing the process. They became like
So in my humble view,
yes,
what I wanted us not to lose in this discussion, each time you have a UN conference on a conflict in Africa, they are talking about mediation, disarmament, demobilization.
Demobilization and resettlement.
And resettlement. None of them will ever talk about capacity building.
Capacity building.
Because you see, for you to be able to have a bottom called a state, you must have a state in charge.
Yeah.
Then give it empowerment to build the capacity of state institutions.
Exactly.
We have battled over that over Somalia. We have battled over that over South Sudan. Now,
you're going to. I know
is the capacity development that you are talking about that they don't bring in or include?
You know,
is it the same as the ones we have our own? Because I see a lot of budgeting in even within MDAs.
Actually, that's what they are doing.
Capacity development, and actually. Even in these periods when we are hard pressed economically, budget-wise, the question is, can we cancel this because it is too much?
General
Workshops and all that. Is that different from what you are talking about?
General Courage is talking about what I was trying to address, only that I was not as maybe clear as him. Conflict transformation. When you're talking about capacity development, you have to have state presence. Exactly. And how is state presence seen? One, unfortunately, you need the state apparatus for coercion. The police, the army, the prisons. Know that you can establish law and what? Order.
Create the order first.
Order.
You must have capacity.
And these institutions have to be what? Have to be not just created by
you mean it in terms of stabilization,
but and more so when we're talking of the coercive apparatus. And this is where the people I interact with tend to get very jittery, because you tell them as you establish the coercive apparatus, the personnel manning those coercive apparatus need tooling, need skilling, and they need constant training. One, on understanding that you are giving the background of the NRA, you're a people's army. That you are nothing without the what? The people. If you win the hearts and souls of the population, you will therefore be what? Acceptable.
Yeah.
Then you have to acquire the skills. You know, handling a gun requires a lot of discipline. A lot of discipline. And where there's a state breaks down completely, then the gun can be used as a tool of operation. Operation. And this is what seems to be happening in many of these territories. Fortunately for us, General Kuraije has a very rich background in Ituri and Oriental.
And northern Uganda.
Northern Uganda,
and
yes,
Sudan.
but
by the way,
but his tour of duty in DRC was very interesting. He had to deal with the communities.
Edgar, exactly.
He had to deal with and for the first time, when Kuraije was in that part of the country, I remember he introduced a program. Don't ask me how I got to know these things. He introduced a program, first of all, intra-community and inter-community.
And inter-community.
And for the first time, the Kuraijes were bringing leaders from different ethnic groupings to sit in the same radio station to talk for the first time since independence.
I didn't know he knew that.
Well, I've been following issues in this region for some time.
Let me bring in some thought from outside as well. One of our gadgets is not operating well, so I'm using my personal phone to pick some of the comments. Someone here called Jane is saying, Charles, my brother, this is a great panel. Thank you, Jane. And she says, now I think as Africans, it's also high time we stopped throwing around this infamous, she puts it in quotation, infamous statement of we have a common enemy. Why that narrative all the time? It's Africans ourselves who have got a problem. We have inflated egos, we have primitive ways of accumulating wealth, we have huge appetite for power and so on. Then she says, I'm a true Pan-Africanist, but who is risking Edgar to ask him to talk about M23 when he has a side?
With M23? My side is Ugandan.
Thank you, Jane. Now, that is a common accusation that, you know.
I know, do you realize what we're talking about?
Yeah.
That's a fellow African.
Yeah.
She thinks the symptoms are the problems.
Are the problems.
But we need to get to accept certain things.
You see,
we have our own issues here in Africa, yes, like any other system. But at the same time, who is gaining out of this?
But there is who is...
That's how we assess our enmity.
Are you so powerless as to admit that we know our problem, we know our challenges, we know our weaknesses,
no,
and we know the solutions,
we're getting
but
blind.
that the people who are against us, and yet we also know that there are people against us, that they are better placed to disorganize us and we can't fight.
Now, when you see the uniformity of occurrences, you'll definitely know, you'll get to, and then you see who exactly gains out of whatever. You'll get to know the bigger enemy. Of course, we may have our own issues and weaknesses here and there. What we have internally are weaknesses, but in the process, who gains out of this whole saga? Do we gain ourselves? Of course, we are the losers. So you cannot invest in an area where you are literally losing.
We can gain if we are organized. But just a quick one. For the case of what is happening in Khartoum, you are aware the petrodollar is under stress.
Yes.
And many countries are now choosing to trade, having bilateral arrangements for convertibility of their currencies. Gold and diamonds are very easily convertible if they are stored.
Yeah.
A kind of buffer, a stock, very easily convertible. So now all these countries are scampering for, not scampering, they are, what is the word? Scrambling
Gold.
for the gold. And wherever there's gold, believe me, there's going to be a lot of, unless we're deliberate and intentional to keep conflict away, or to keep, because where people interact, as they say in Kinyarwanda, hari abantu ntabura uruntu. Where there are human beings, they will always what? Disagree, and there will be friction. What is critical is how you resolve those conflicts. So, on this occasion, we have some world powers that are scrambling for the Sudan. Russia wanted to establish a naval base there, and they were in advanced negotiations. America comes in and says, no, it won't happen. And towards April the 8th, when they were supposed to sign the framework agreement that would give the timeline and roadmap for return to civilian role, America started giving conditionalities. If the RSF are not absorbed in the national army, there will be consequences. Now, you're telling a sovereign country, and mind you, the Sudanese armed forces have made it very clear. These are people like General Kulaije who have been to military academy, they are professional soldiers, and you're telling them that, well, I wouldn't want to use the word militias, because the UPDF that General Kulaije belongs to is actually an amalgamation of 22 different
militias.
Fighting for
well, you've used the word militia. You said fighting groups. Some of them were as bad as the Janjaweed. I don't want to mention names, but they were as ideologically bankrupt as the Janjaweed. But for some reason, through reorientation, and to use the buzzword of the Korea ages, correct ideology.
No, conscientization is a matter you cannot play around with. It's a necessity. It's as necessary as having a mother breastfeeding her baby. And if you ignore it, it's at your own peril.
It's at your own peril. So the things are very critical, and for so long as we continue to be the disorganized people we are, the powers that be will come to disorganize us further.
You see, and for me, that's
and there's something that is totally missing from all these discussions I've listened to. In Darfur, it's full-blown war.
Yes.
Egyptian fighter jets, Sukhois, are hitting those people there.
In whose interest?
There is another. There is another conflict.
The weapon manufacturer.
There's another conflict at Al Fashag Square, the 260 square mile land that had been disputed for some time. Ethiopia had the de facto control of the area, because it's a very fertile area, and the cultivators, the Amhara and the Tigray cultivators, not the what are they called, not the herdsmen, would use it for growing grain and cereals. Now there came a point. The area belongs to Sudan. But because of many years of absence of the state effectively in all areas of the Sudan, it had been occupied by the Ethiopians. Now, when war broke out between the Tigray rebels and the Ethiopian government, now the Tigray who had occupied that area were moved. They were forcefully moved, and they resettled Amhara there. Now, the Amhara had not been used to the local populace, so they started what? Fighting. And at one point, the Ethiopian forces crossed and killed about 7 Sudanese soldiers. General Burhani went on television, talked very tough, and sent fighter jets into Ethiopia, flattening a column of Ethiopian troops in June 2022.
Wow.
So it's, and obviously, you know, there's that fight over the Nile waters. Egypt is an interested party. On this occasion, Egypt and Sudan had joint military exercises. Actually, it is Egypt that saved this government from falling.
That's true.
The Sudanese.
Because there was, I don't want to mention some security information, regional security, but anyway, there was breakdown of military intelligence. So they didn't know when these people were going to strike. They struck a military air base and destroyed some 5 helicopters. But unknown to them, the Egyptians had been using another air base. And it's their attack helicopters that helped reverse. Because remember, they were aiming for the army headquarters and the presidential palace.
Okay.
And they've been heavily fortified. They are fighting street by street, building by building.
Okay, now as we need to start now the descent, and we are about to land. So the question that a Ugandan
how are you landing?
It will be smooth landing. It will be a smooth landing because the weather at destination is good.
You remember your landing in Mogadishu when UPDF was deploying? You remember that?
and a hail of...
This is not landing in...
And a hail of bullets.
This is not landing in
But is the
Mogadishu.
wreckage still at Mogadishu airport?
Listen, Edgar. So I need us to... a person watching would be now wondering, what lessons do we learn from this as Uganda? That's one. But two, how do we... What's the interest of Uganda? We can handle that simultaneously. But also three, three should be really, the Ugandan would be interested in knowing, can we get involved? As good a neighbor to a neighbor, can we, because we are in Somalia, the other side, we decided to get involved. We are in Congo, of course, Congo is immediate, but we also have helped Sudan. And so, of course, we have helped Rwanda. The question is, can we get involved? Must we get involved? At what level? Is it at a level of East African community?
Must we get involved? That's
Yeah.
a very critical question.
Yeah, so, or we leave it and watch and ensure that it doesn't reach us, Professor.
Or adopt a wait and see attitude.
Wait and see, because that's also a solution. Wait and see, as you...
Yeah, those are very interesting questions. Of course, it's likely to affect us, but maybe because we have someone in between there, so it may take time. But of course, given the humanitarian crisis and what you listen on TV, people are trying actually to flee if they can be given an opportunity. So definitely it's going to create challenges for the region. But I don't want us to leave this talk show with the attitude that Africa is simply being managed from somewhere. It's true there are foreign interests in this matter. But as Edgar said, what are our interests? You know, one of the reasons when Africa was being colonized and the slave trade before, and the kind of writings that have come out of that is the building of stereotypes of Africans being infertile. And they are there to be managed by others. And you must have seen these caricatures in colonial literature, where you have a black man with different kind of, it's like, I don't know what that thing is called, where you move the leg and you move the hand. Yes. So when you read colonial literature, actually that's the impression made about Africa. When we come here and also try to just re-emphasize that we are being managed, there's nothing that can do, we are playing into that kind of narrative. But what is true, like those who know the issues best have told us, there's foreign interest in this matter. But as you say, we should also find out what is our interest in that matter. First of all, it's not wrong to have interest, but for some reason we have been trained to think that it's wrong to be interested because it means you're biased. All people enter these issues with interests. One of the reasons the Afandekula agents went into the DRC was to secure our borders. That was their interest, because their mandate is to protect Uganda. So if you're near Uganda's borders and you're causing trouble, and they come and either do peace building there, that is the interest that they're serving. So it is okay for Africa to be interested. We live in a global world where we are not detached from reality. There are actors and protagonists in this matter. Some of these actors and protagonists are foreign. Some are actually local. And their interests are served by them serving other people's interests. So when we look only external, we miss holding our own accountable. For example, General Hamdan is disturbing the legitimate state of Sudan. We know he's a proxy for something, but in being a proxy, he's not entirely powerless. He has interests that serve his financial base. They also serve his political interests. So those are matters we should engage with as Africa than assuming that there are no African interests in these matters. One time,
just a quick one. Brother Hamdani is not that sophisticated.
Okay, I don't know him. You know him.
He's a P3 school dropout.
I don't know him. You know him.
He's a camel. He was a camel trader.
Yes, but he built experience by controlling the.
No, he's good at trading. He knows that there's a commodity here.
I'm not talking about trading. This man was a sophisticated fighter controlling the war in Darfur.
He has acquired experience.
Yes, experience is not only from class. Knowledge is not only from class.
I wish there are things I can say on air.
No, I don't want you to say what you shouldn't say on air.
Much obliged, Professor.
Can I protect the professor to make her point?
Don't say what you shouldn't say.
And then you can, any of you can counter.
We agreed here, not all knowledge is from class.
Yes.
This man has a history of fighting in Darfur. He has a history of fighting in Yemen. He is a very good trader. So he has knowledge. He could be a P3 dropout. He has knowledge. My point is he has interests. Okay?
I'll tell you after.
And he has interests which are being served, however rudimentary, by his collaborators. So the simple point I'm making is our enemy is not always external. Interests are not only external. Interests are also internal. So those are the people who are messing up Africa and Africans, are some people who we should hold accountable. What I don't want us to do is to go away thinking Africa is totally powerless, is not thinking, and is being managed and caricatured the way those colonial literature look like. That is one thing. Then the other thing you asked, should Uganda be interested? Of course, Uganda will have a track record of peace building on this continent. But I know we always work within a framework. We don't just wake up one day, but I find a college will educate us better. You don't just wake up one day and go in a place because you have an interest and you have a mission. There's a framework within which we work. So when we are approached within that framework, I imagine it will be a good thing for us to support. Sometimes we've supported actively, militarily, but sometimes we've supported by having refugees. For example, we have one of the best refugee policies in the world.
We host 10,000.
We hold 10,000.
Khartoum refugees, 10,000 in Uganda.
Yes, and many for other, we have Somalis, we have everything.
We are talking about Sudan now for Sudan.
So for Sudan, if we are asked upon, I imagine our Office of the Prime Minister will get in touch with whoever is asking them. We should be able to play a role in that. But there are also many other services that Ugandans have been able to do. So we should watch. I know if it was close in our border, we would have acted in a particular way. But right now, there's South Sudan. But when we asked upon, I think we should say yes.
Good, good. Edgar, those questions that I asked, must we get involved?
Yes, yes. But just a quick one. I want to quick.
To what extent are we going to be affected?
General Hamudani has 4 groups of experts he has deployed, he has employed. There's Wagner of Russia. It's a Russian group. It manages his logistics, including arms. There's a French PR group. There's a Canadian PR group, and he has also a lobby group in Washington, D.C. They are the ones who are actually managing his social media, including Twitter account. He speaks broken Arabic. He can't communicate.
But he can command.
Not really command. There are forces behind. You see, when you have money, when you have gold.
So he has interest.
Whose stooge is he?
He's not just a stooge.
He started off as a Bashir stooge, and by the way,
I like that.
By the way, he started
because if you look at his capacities, if you like you're describing his capacities,
yes,
he cannot be the person who has that type of product.
I'll give you a live example from Uganda. 1971, there was a coup d'etat. Everybody believes it was Idi Amin who was in charge of it.
But it was not.
No, it was a Munyarwanda immigrant officer from Namtamba. I don't have permission from his family, I don't know to mention his name. But because he was very highly educated, he was sidelined, and they put Idi Amin. So this is how these international forces operate.
And that is true.
This is how they operate. I've even seen it with the M23 and what have you. I don't want to go into those dynamics because they're too fresh.
Okay,
so
should we get involved?
Should we get involved?
Yes.
Yes. Why?
How?
Why and how? I'm going
to what
give
extent?
One.
Let's be fast.
Khartoum is the biggest market for our Robusta coffee. Those of you who are from Buganda should pay more attention to Khartoum and tell your leaders, in particular your president, to secure your market. 25% of Uganda's Robusta coffee is bought in Khartoum. 2, almost 80% of Uganda's what they call non-fine tea. I don't want to use derogatory words on air. What they call the BP, fannings, and dust. You know, they like this thick tea leaves. Not the fine one that is consumed by British aristocrats. And much of it, you know, comes from the area where I come from in Toro. 80% of that tea goes to the Sudan. I'm not mentioning these other, but they don't even have enough sugar. production in their own country. So it's a big market for our commodities. We need to secure that market. Already, Somalia, Yemen, Pakistan, those have been the biggest destinations for our teas. Unfortunately, Pakistan devalued its currency. I think it was around 80 rupees to a dollar. It's now 185 or $200 to 200 rupees to a dollar. We lost out on that market. Yemen, because of the war, and now Sudan. Believe me, the tea factories will just have to close. Three, total breakdown of the state in Sudan. Because they already, you know, South Kordofan, for instance, the Nuba Mountains, and they are controlled by a different rebel group.
No.
Yes, the Nuba Mountains. I've interacted with them. No, not that I'm a rebel, no. But you see, because of breakdown of presence of the state, there's proliferation of light and small weapons, and these are the ones that fuel conflict. Four, there will be a rise in Islamism, extreme Islam, and by extension, terrorism. We have ADF sleeper cells in Kampala here. They just need a little bit more funding, and we go into bed and assuming everything is okay, and you'll see bombs going off. Then also we need to get involved simply because that forced migration, refugees will distort everything within the region. There is already stress on the resources, the natural resources being grazing, cultivation. There's already a declaration of humanitarian assistance for up to 40 million people who are at the verge of starvation in the Horn of Africa. Then you have total breakdown of a state just in the same region. Believe me, we're inviting more trouble for ourselves. So why should Uganda get involved? Egypt is actively involved in combat operations there. Chad, very little state presence or state strength of the state. Central African Republic, South Sudan is still trying to find itself as a state. Ethiopia, same thing. So it leaves Ethiopia and Eritrea. So Libya is in turmoil. So it leaves Uganda and Kenya. Now, I don't know whether President Ruto would have that stature, but from my interactions with the political elite in Khartoum, whom I'm very close to, the ones who are on Omdurman, because the war is restricted to Khartoum, Omdurman is a little peaceful, and so they still have power and generators running, so you're able to communicate with them. Now, the elite there are looking to a senior statesman, an elderly person, who can call all these groups to order, and they listen to him. And they've formed the opinion that President Museveni is best suited to mediate in the impasse that we have in Khartoum. I've said it amongst Ugandan groups, and those who are anti-Museveni have come upon me like a lynch mob.
That's
but
not a problem.
That is the truth of the matter.
Your conscience
and I believe in what I'm saying.
Yes, sir. Those questions that I asked, must we get involved? To what magnitude? What lessons do we learn from some of these things? It could be geopolitically, it could be, in terms of management of security-wise, stability, politically, if you like. What lessons?
Of course, the lawyers kind of digested the economic and other areas, but personally, I would look at the situation that, okay, it's like if we had every reason to get involved in like in Somalia and Kar and other areas which are even not, which the countries where we don't share borders, that there is no way we can leave Sudan on its own, because I look at the question is Southern Sudan a perfect curtain that can shield us from this escalation of trouble from Khartoum? Of course not. Because we know what's happening, we know how fragile sometimes their statutory situation can be, meaning that if we just look away, it is just a question of time that the same problem will push through Southern Sudan, and it will eventually come to our borders and possibly disorganize us here. So these are our neighbors, and in the process, if Southern Sudan cannot be looked at as a perfect curtain, and we also look at it because we look at the connection between the teams that have disorganized the Sahel region and the teams that are in Congo. Of course, you can see a connection. So I'm looking at my picture is we have a war. We have someone who is interested to have wars in Africa, but that person has kind of recruited and maintained a militia called the jihadists, and definitely it's like they will take over Africa if we do not wake up now.
Mm-hmm. General Kulaiji.
You see, when I hear perfect curtain, I'm amazed. Already, you have issues in South Sudan. Mm. You have roots of instabilities across the belt of the equatorial belt. So you are not safe either with South Sudan. Now when you have Khartoum flaring up, yet here is not yet stable, you certainly have a potential for an explosion. But you see, we wouldn't want us to be like the Nigerians. When they were asked to contribute troops to Somalia, they said, what for?
It is far.
It is far. Little did they know,
Boko Haram
was deployed in Somalia.
Somalia, yeah.
So if they had come in Somalia much earlier, they would have nipped Boko Haram in the bud. Mm. So it's myopic for you to imagine that you are far from the problem.
They have reached Mozambique.
Now it is Mozambique. But most important thing I want us to emphasize, as Africans, we have a responsibility to each other. Mm. If your neighbor's house is on fire, you have a duty to help put out that fire. 3, must you get involved? Yes. I'm glad Council has given the economic reasons, which many of us didn't even know. You know, we sit in our comfort zones and we think we know things when we don't know them. Lastly, you see, when we say we are also to blame, I agree. But to what extent are we to blame? You know, at times when I listen to discussions like what submissions made by Professor, you tend to think people want to say there will be, let there be. That a decision will be taken that we all should think Ugandan, should think African. It can never happen. This consciousness is implanted at childhood level for someone to appreciate he or she is African, and there is a cause to live for.
So today, should we give up?
No.
Yeah.
Today, I have asked a question before, and I would like to pose it for you, all of you. What is it that a Ugandan will be ready to die for? And from once you answer that question, I go home.
Have we built a national consciousness for that?
And what's the process of building that national consciousness? Because we should go beyond wishing. What is the process you're laying down for?
I posed it in Parliament, but I didn't get an answer.
He has posed the same question. We cannot also just keep posing questions. Let's declare the process.
See,
he's in uniform. There's a reason he's asking that.
Okay.
Professor, yeah. The purpose of questions is to provoke our thinking.
Exactly.
I cannot come here and begin giving you the answers, even if I have them. You already have disparity in our understanding of the problems we are facing, all right? And you can never have a common understanding of these things. But the bottom line is the consciousness. People are talking about the Marcus Garvey's. What built them is that consciousness.
And he was a very wealthy fellow. He had the shipping line.
The consciousness.
It's the black consciousness.
That you abandon whatever you have for a cause you believe in.
And there was a process they built that consciousness. So I think for me,
A process?
this is a process. I mean, they had been built through a process of fighting slavery, fighting civil rights. So there were those kind of processes. Yeah.
The conditions built them.
That's what I'm meaning. So we may not have the same common understanding, but we can have a process. Otherwise, we shall keep lamenting. 50 years from now, also Paul said, this is Africa.
Unfortunately, Mr. Doctor, as we close, we are entering a new spiral and cycle of violence.
Yes.
And I'm afraid if we do not, of course we fail to nip it in the bud, it's already out there, unless we become deliberate, intentional and purposeful, that we've got to step out on our comfort zones, confront the problem as it is, take the bull by the horns. We're going to have a spiral of violence that will last another 30 years.
And for us, it is worse that we have that lack of consciousness. Then we have a youth
that
bulge,
is disengaged.
a youth group, 78% plus or minus 2, which is totally disengaged, largely.
Lacking leadership.
Then which lacks leadership to a great extent.
Yes, they need leadership. Then
which thinks, by the way, majority of them did not see you people fight.
No.
So these millennials, they don't have any problem with saying, bring it on. You know, that's the catch one. Bring it on. They are not as careful as our generation
And
of the 40s.
They don't watch these talk shows.
And then
No,
they have nothing to do with these talk shows to learn anything, because these talk shows too much English, too much English. For us who want to genda nebigenda in Luga, we go by the wave. So if there is violence, the other side they say, we could test that. So, and leaders,
What
if
did
you
they
don't,
say in Kenya? The tear gas was expired. They needed a strong one.
they needed a stronger. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much.
I know I have to close off, but I really have to say this. When you watch the Sudan, you see the bombs that are going off,
Yes.
the aerial bombing, the street-to-street battles. Those bullets, those bombs do not discriminate on ground of religion, creed, ethnicity, or race, age.
Or age.
Or age.
In fact, the people
or even beauty.
The people who are dying most now are the young ones.
The young ones. So if any superstructure suddenly collapses, we all stand to be.
Thank you very much, Professor Sally. Thank you very much, Edgar Tavaro. Thank you very much, David Egesa, and thank you, General Kulaije. Please come again when we call on you for other discussions. Very interesting discussion, but you know, you can imagine a man sweating under AC. The discussion has been very good, but you know why I'm sweating?
No.
Arsenal has lost so badly.
3-0.
3-0 is...
That's why I don't watch football.
No, because it is 4-1.
4-1?
It ended
So the
4-1.
squad?
It's like 3-0.
Some of my friends have been sending me updates. I've just checked, and it is not very good. But that is soccer, as they say.
On home platform.
Soccer is soccer.
And then the Arsenal supporters are very noisy on that platform. So when Arsenal loses, we have peace.
So we should lose more.
Even Facebook is peaceful.
But also, you know, this has been a big game, because Arsenal was a single team playing so many other teams.
Charles, there's one of your good fans.
Bye-bye, God bless
one of your good fans who did watch because he was watching Arsenal.
Oh.
Dr. Johnson.
To all the Arsenal supporters out there, Bera Mugumu, that's how they say, be strong, be hard. You know, we will live to fight another day. Good night, God bless you all.
Talk with freedom.
freedom. Get MTN Freedom voice bundles that don't expire. Dial *100 *21# or my MTN app for more bundles. Together, we're unstoppable.
One-on-one with Michael Jordan Lukomwa.
A weekly face-to-face conversation focusing on accountability, inspiration, information, and sensitization of the public from the various sources, such as inspirational profiles.
Having disability is not inability.
Professional guidance.
There is no special antiretroviral therapy that is given specifically for discordant couples.
And of course, politics.
Don't you see anywhere that you would give a credit in the fight against COVID?
My role as the owner of the country is not to, be preoccupied by giving credit to my servant.
We have said that if we are to talk to General Museveni, there must be certain conditions in place.
Is it true that you paid 5 million shillings to MPs that voted for Anita Monga Tayebo?
That is laughable. Why would we pay when we have nominated them as SEC?
Every party has been represented in Uganda's parliament for 10 years. We own by one MP, you yourself and my daughter, Susan.
Every Friday 9 p.m. it's One-on-One with Michael Jordan Lukomwa on UBC TV, inspiring Uganda.
UBC, inspiring Uganda. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
The Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, under the auspices of the East African Community, will host the 10th East African Petroleum Conference and Exhibition 2023 from the 9th to the 11th of May 2023 at the Kampala